Part 3, the aftermath. Don't get me wrong, Jay was, and maybe still is, I don't know, haven't talked to him for a very long time, a charming motherfucker. And from pictures that I've seen from back then, now that I have decent vision myself, he was a pretty good looking dude back then. Kind of like Keanu Reeves during the Bill and Ted era. But in the case of romantic relationships, I never relied on my eyes. Like everything else, I learned to trust my kinesthetic and spidey senses. What does that person feel like, quite literally, as well as the overall vibe? In fact, that's how I came to date a dude named Shane for about 10 months when I was 19. I was out at a dance club named Julie's in Victoria with a bunch of my girlfriends. We were all up on the dance floor, wilding out, and Shane rolls up to me and says, "Hey, babe, want to take a walk on the wild side?" Grabs my hand and guides me away from my friends, so it's just me and him dancing. Totally cheesy, but I've always liked confidence, even if it's just liquid courage, fueled by alcohol, was mostly the case with Shane. But as we were dancing, I put my hand on his solar plexus. Dude had been an Olympic hopeful swimmer in secondary school and was actively playing pro rugby at the time. We were both 19, so that was pretty much all it took. That's before I knew much about chakras, which would have tipped me off to how that particular relationship would wind up. But lessons come in all kinds of packages. Back to Jay. He was a talker. He could tell stories and he was funny. And we were relatively sexually compatible. We celebrated his birthday a week and a half later on July 17th. So he was a Cancer. And had I known more about astrology at the time, that would have been a huge red flag too. But he was also an atheist who would laugh at astrology, not to mention all the other earth-based spiritual practices that was integral to who I was and am as a person. Another huge red flag that I couldn't see at the time because I still had so much unprocessed trauma from my time in West Virginia that I was still self-medicating with vitamin D and really good Seattle weed. At some point, Ashley and Jay ended up getting into a massive fight, and I ended up staying with Jay and Jeff at their apartment. They hadn't been living there very long themselves and didn't have very much furniture. Because we were all broke jokers at the time, Jay and I bought a cheap, really shitty little white dresser from IKEA, the first piece of furniture that we bought together. I unpacked the suitcase I'd been traveling with into that dresser, so I felt at least some semblance of grounding. Before I left West Virginia, I had briefly dated this young punk rock dude named Matt. He had a mohawk, played guitar, and was a physics major. We met when we briefly worked on a holography project together. We hooked up a few times, but it wasn't good. Dude was really awkward. So it never really was anything more than just casual. But when Matt and his friend Ricardo rolled through on the way to do a UW grad school visit, Matt was shocked to learn that I'd already found someone else so soon. Before long, Jay convinces me to find a one-bedroom apartment in downtown Seattle with him instead of getting a place with Ashley in SeaTech. He made a good argument. I was living off my West Virginia grad school stipend, which is only $750 a month. That barely was sustainable in Morgantown, and Seattle was significantly more expensive, even in 1994. Rent for a one-bedroom apartment is cheaper than rent for a two-bedroom apartment. Shortly after Jay's birthday, we spent some time looking for apartments and quickly found and moved into our first apartment together on First Hill, aka Pill Hill in Seattle in August 1994, just down the road from Harborview Hospital. Jeff took off in the middle of the night right before we moved out and stole my suitcase. By the end of August, beginning of September, Jay asks me to marry him and makes this case. It's a win-win if we can agree to a few ground rules. I get American citizenship, he gets Canadian. We both need to work, so double income. I didn't really want to have kids, and neither did he. And besides that, I'm Rh negative, and that rare alien blood and his blood was not compatible with mine. Yeah, you can get a RhoGAM shot when you're pregnant to prevent your immune system from attacking the fetus, but it's better if you just procreate with someone with a compatible blood type to avoid complications. So, no kids. We had to share expenses and bank accounts and be monogamous so as not to arouse suspicion about our arranged marriage. When we talked about the overall time commitment, he initially said 2 years minimum. What about the upper limit, the maximum? I asked. He said, probably 7 years, or longer if we end up liking it. That should have been another red flag. By this time, Ashley had become a full-blown alcoholic and would often go missing. I didn't really have anyone else in Seattle since the folks at my doctoral internship that summer weren't particularly friendly and rather standoffish. The Seattle freeze is real. So when Jay asked me to marry him, I said yes.